Aberdeen has been in financial hardship for decades. Its two principal income sources come from timber and fishing. Any town that's based on harvesting natural resources is in financial trouble in this country right now. And they've been down for years.
You know, Kurt lived in Aberdeen and he spent a lot of time in Seattle. I think in Seattle, Kurt found a community that he couldn't find in the very small town where he grew up.
They weren't from here, they lived in Aberdeen. And I mean, they had a pretty big impact locally.
I came from a small town, I came from the suburbs, but we had the same sort of shared experience in attitude and music.
In Teen Spirit, you seem to complain about the apathy of our generation. Is that right?
Whatever you want to make out of it, it's up to you.
And do you share
It's your crossword puzzle.
And do you share this lack of engagement yourself?
What, being apathetic?
Yeah.
Sure.
Why?
Why? Because we sleep too much.
Nirvana to me is a band consisting of three brilliant performers, and I thank them very much for sharing their talent with me. I think they're great, and I miss them.
I grew up in the town of Aberdeen, the place where Nirvana came from, and all I hear in school is how much people like myself look like Nirvana. I thought Nirvana had really nice music. I think that the media kind of ruined Nirvana.
This town has kind of an attitude. It's kind of broken up into two parts. There's the jocks and then there's the kids like Kurt. And they're kind of like not on real friendly terms with one another. So
That's
that wouldn't surprise me.
Pretty much a jock town. I mean, you got a lot of people that are into sports, and if you're not into sports with the majority, then you're really not in with the group. So you kind of get isolated.
You know, Kurt always talked about how in high school everyone laughed at him and beat him up, you know, and he had a hard time. And I think that probably Chris and Dave also were considered weirdos in a kind of conventional setting.
We had the same sort of shared experience of being the only punk rockers in our high school and getting beaten up and that sort of thing.
A lot of the bands that came to be known as Seattle bands weren't from here at all. Nirvana were from Aberdeen, which is a lifetime away. And so the inputs of musical style and the society they came from are radically different. Nirvana weren't ever really a part of the Seattle scene until they had sold a lot of records. They never really lived here until they'd sold a lot of records.
People have said there wasn't so much a Seattle sound or a sub-pop sound as there was a Seattle look or a sub-pop sound, and part of that was my photography and the way the design, all the early sub-pop records had this real, everything was consistent, the black bar at the top and bottom of the singles, Snapshot by Charles Peterson, produced by Jack and Dino, the only credits. You know, you get 20, 30 singles or records like that and people start to wonder.
Sub Pop were one among a number of labels that were trying to make a go of it in Seattle. And in fact, Sub Pop began as a fanzine, in which there was a sampler cassette bound in or sent with the fanzine. And it sort of grew into a record label. I think on the strength of having seen Soundgarden and some other early Seattle bands like Green River, they were really compelled to give it a throw.
There was a fanzine called Sub Pop that had cassettes with it. And Sub Pop 100 was just kind of like a vinyl version of those cassettes. But that was mainly, it had some Northwest artists on it, but it was artists from all over the States.
Sub Pop's history was rocky before Nirvana broke, and they came near failure at certain points. But signing and nurturing Nirvana was their biggest act of genius. I guess they recognized that this could be the band that would change everything, and it did.
What we're doing is nothing new. It's just that our band happened to penetrate into the mainstream.
Yeah, so mainstream kids now are realizing the fact that they can start bands.
Yeah.
I think that's very good. It's very nice and flattering that we helped aid something like that. But I don't know, that ideal has always been around in the underground.
When I left Seattle in the early 80s, there was nothing like the scene that happened over the course of the 80s. It was a working class town, it was a provincial town, small place, and the scene it had was not that different than any other scene across the country. But something happened in the 80s. People from California started moving to Seattle, and a computer industry was born that gave young people jobs and disposable incomes. And suddenly there were all these people in Seattle in their 20s who had money, who liked to go out at night. And this is what's so important for Nirvana. Kids from smaller towns would move to Seattle to find some kind of big city vibe.
There was a pretty tight-knit music community in Seattle until they became millionaires. And I think they're still pretty tight-knit, but it's a little bit more cloistered than it used to be. In the early days, the people who lived in this town lived in group houses with studios or rehearsal spaces in the basement, and a lot of bands happened simply because you were living together.
I don't think anybody really thought of it as like a sound until after the fact. There's just a bunch of bands that everybody was friends and lived together and had the same records and stuff, so, you know, they're apt to sound somewhat similar. But it's kind of like outsiders commenting on how similar the music was before. People around here really thought of it as like a movement per se. We just thought there was a bunch of good bands.
Kurt Cobain was really fascinated with this band called the Melvins, the heaviest band out there. They're like Sabbath times 1,000, you know? They're Sabbath to the nth degree. Now, I wouldn't say that Nirvana were a glamorous band, but they were attracted to the way in which these kinds of bands combined the heaviness of metal and hard rock with the anti-establishment attitude of punk.
In the old days in Seattle, there was one club to play and you could play once or twice a month. And you'd better be damn good that night, because it was the only charge you were going to get that month. In part, that made this a recording scene more than a performance scene, but it also meant that when the bands from Seattle got up on stage, they were fully focused and committed to what they were doing. And it wasn't the kind of locker room football player, dude, we rock, that you're going to get out of a hair band or a metal band. It was a kind of religious fervor, to put it a little more extremely than I really mean it. It was a kind of release. And when they went out on the road, I think it's one of the things which really made a big difference here. When Seattle bands showed up, they were really good live.
The first time I saw Nirvana was at the Vogue Tavern. It was the first time they played in Seattle, and they had Aaron Burkhart, I believe, as their drummer. And it was a Sub Pop Sunday night. They were opening for Blood Circus. Everyone had sort of heard about this band, and we all, you know, the members of Mudhoney and Soundgarden and Sub Pop all came out to see them. And I was standing in the back, and I looked at Jonathan Ponham, and I said, "Are you sure you want to put out a record by these guys?" And I had my camera there, and I didn't bother to photograph them. I thought that they were pretty atrocious. 6 months later, they released Love Buzz. They had a new lineup, and they were amazing. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
I remember the first time I saw them was at a club called the Vogue, and I just went because Bruce Pavick called everyone up and said, there's this band and they're friends of the Melvins and supposedly they're really good. So you should all go see them. So that's kind of like any friend of the Melvins, you know.
When I heard that single, I played it and played it and played it. I think I wore out the first copy of it that I had. Every party, you just love buzz. It would just get get everybody moving. It was really. I know that Nirvana weren't so happy that their first big hit or their popular song was a cover, and they didn't even really, I think, want to release it on a single to begin with. But it was just a phenomenal pop song.
There's a particular moment when I think you can hear Nirvana becoming the great band that they became. It's a song called Sliver, which originally was a Sub Pop single and is now included on the Incesticide EP. In a way, it contains the basic story that Kurt was telling, this urge, this desire to find a safe space in an ugly world.
I wish we would have thrown a bomb in the music business and they all would have been at least dismembered. But I don't know, it was more like a firecracker, ladyfinger.
Yeah.
Pop.
Years ago, I had an opportunity to see Nirvana in the Vogue, and I passed it up and said, those guys suck, I don't want to see them. Regretted it to this day.
We had the opportunity to play one of our very first gigs with the band. I'm in the band, the Rhino Humpers, and we were given this opportunity thanks to our drummer's mom, who booked him at this club in Tacoma at that time, which was called the Legends. And they played there along with the Melvins, another band called Machine, and we opened up. We had a 20-minute slot. It was a pretty incredible opportunity for us to get to play for those people. Nirvana was my favorite band at the time, and all of ours. So it was a real honor. And then just to watch them play was something else. That was a real incredible experience. I don't think I had seen that raw form for quite a while. It was really, really, really cool, and that was very inspiring for me from that moment on.
Well, photographing Nirvana, Kurt was very shy, and Chris was very tall. It was very difficult to, especially doing group photos, to sort of get them all on the same plane, because both Chad and Kurt were, several feet shorter than Chris.
All I remember is that I thought the guy had a cool voice and that Chris was tall. I'm sure I was just talking at the bar or whatever. Cool voice, but I didn't, really think twice about it.
This dude, John McEnroe, he plays guitar and a lot of tennis, of course. And he's probably one of Nirvana's biggest fans. Totally inspired by like the songwriting and everything. And he would go and kick some tunes and play Nirvana covers. So it was nice that I could play their tunes with someone who was a marginal player and get still a couple thousand people off, on Nirvana.
Kurt Cobain was a very, very serious cat. The songs were, they cut right to the heart of a lot of stuff. They cut right to the soul of a lot of the things, a lot of the shit that I go through. So much respect to Kurt Cobain.
The very first time I photographed Nirvana was I went over to Bainbridge Island where Chad was living, and they were there, they were going to practice. So we just spent the day driving around in the extremely trashed Ford Econoline that we drove around the countryside in, just looking for locations. And I had my girlfriend with me, and there were just several people riding around the van with us, and we'd stop in a field and I'd take their picture, and they were very naive and it was a beautiful day.
Bleach was the best, I thought, in my opinion, and I'm really glad that the other members, Chris Novoselic and the drummer, I don't know his name, but I'm glad that they're off doing their own careers too.
Just before things started getting big in Seattle, actually, I was looking for some kind of groove to get on it, to be free, rebellious, whatever, and just Bleach all the way loud. And I remember when Nevermind came out, it just changed everything, musically in this town, socially. But on anything, I'd say it changed. And for what you see now on TV and media, when I see with rock and roll, I think it's all based somewhat because of that band and some of the other bands in town. But it created a voice, I think, maybe for the 90s and future times.
Several months after Bleach was released, they needed to do a publicity session. So Nirvana came up to my studio, and I just really wanted to do something simple with them. And so I just had a piece of white seamless paper hung up, and Kurt comes in and he's just like, I hate white seamless paper. That's just has nothing to do with punk rock or us or anything. So I said, well, here's a can of spray paint. Do something. You know, I don't know what else to do with you guys. And so he painted a plus, just without hesitating, painted a plus and a minus on the piece of paper, and it was perfect. It definitely had connotations because the way most of the shots were done, Chad was sitting under the minus sign, and I think about 2 weeks later, he was out of the band.
Dave Grohl is Nirvana's secret weapon. There's no doubt about it. His power drumming is what finally pushed their sound forward, out of what was kind of a muddy and confused sound before. Also, Dave's instincts, like Kurt's instincts, are toward a combination of punk and pop.
Nirvana's mass cool. Really like Nirvana, really admire Dave Grohl as a drummer.
I became a drummer because I listened to Dave sit there and pound away on the drums. And when Kurt died, I felt like a chunk of my heart came out.
With a twist of lemon.
With Dave, there was definitely a change in the sound, and I think Kurt's songwriting changed, progressed. Probably more than just about any other band, their songwriting progressed.
I think Chris and Kurt had an almost symbiotic tie. They were so close, and their playing was like one person in a way. But Dave was the stranger, the new element that made Nirvana into the supergroup that they became.
There's a shot of Dave Grohl at the Seattle Center Coliseum in '93, I believe. Don't get too many shots of drummers, but this one of Dave it really sums up his power, his ability.
I think other people started to, like when they signed to Geffen, and people like Geffen and kind of people in the music business started to realize that it might start to take off before the band did. Because the band just, did what they always did. They just played shows and wrote music.
By the time Nirvana were signed to Geffen, Mother Love Bone were big bonus babies signed to Mercury or Polygram or some corporate entity down there. Soundgarden had already signed to A&M. It was already clear that it was now for the first time possible for Seattle bands to be taken seriously in the major marketplace. Nirvana were signed at a time when Sub Pop were in some financial disarray and when lots of bands were looking for ways out.
Yeah, it's the only record release party that I've been to where the band got kicked out of their own party. Geffen bought all the beer for the first 2 hours, and everyone took good advantage of it, including the band. There was a bunch of vegetable platters with a bunch of dips, and those. There was like large quantities of dips and hollowed out vegetables, and those ended up all over the place. So the floor was all sticky from the oils and the dips, so everybody was kind of sliding around on the floors of the place. But yeah, but that was okay at the time that everyone got kicked out. It was time to be kicked out.
What it really meant to me was just a new beginning, kind of a new spark. And when I first heard Nirvana, I would listen to the songs and I had no idea what he was saying in the lyrics. But it was like the music itself just gave you this feeling that you couldn't forget. It was like embedded inside of you, and no matter what, even if you didn't know what the lyrics were, the music transported you into that realm that Kurt Cobain wanted you to be in.
We were just listening to videos, and Smells Like Teen Spirit was on all the time. All of a sudden everybody was just requesting the same video over and over, and it really struck a chord, a real deep chord in some of us, especially me. When I got out of jail and I bought the album and I listened to the whole thing, I was, to say the least, I was impressed. I was blown away.
One of the best shows I ever saw was a surprise gig at the university in Bellingham, opening for Mudhoney. And there was a photographer, I was shooting away, and there was this bunch of photographers there, and there was this one photographer who kept getting in my way, and I was like, why aren't you taking pictures? It's Nirvana, you know? And he's like, look man, I have one frame of film left, and I'm saving it for the destruction climax. And I was just like, get out of my way. And it ended up that they didn't do a destruction. They brought these two 7-year-old kids on stage, these two 7-year-old boys, strapped their instruments around them, and these kids just stood there and kind of like strummed, you know, Chris's giant bass, and then everyone was shouting, destroy them, destroy them. Well, the kid with the bass took it off, and I have a picture of it somewhere, and just somehow managed to get that bass over his head and pounded it on the stage. And Chris was just horrified because that wasn't the bass to do that with.
What did you get by smashing guitars on the scene?
Satisfaction, climax.
Don't have to do encores.
Yeah, there you go. It's a good excuse when you have to do an encore.
You could line up 40 people and have them, 40 musicians, and have them jump on the drum kit like that, and you would never get that determined look, that calm look on his face. You know, he's not grimacing, he's just doing it.
There's my only big rock revelation experience was a Nirvana show, and it's for real. And it's corny to say now because, you know, it's like, well, I remember this old Nirvana show and it was this big revelation. But for real, there was a show at the place called the OK Hotel, and it was about 6 months before Nevermind came out, and it was the first time they ever played Teen Spirit. And it was a packed show. It's just a zoo. The place was just gross. And, you know, and it was a cool show, and it was going along just fine. And they said something like, blah, 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 the song's called Team Spirit. Like, Team Spirit, it's a dumb name. And they played the song, and people knew, you know, because people would see the band all the time, and people knew all the songs on Bleach, and they knew most of the newer songs at that point that were new, like In Bloom and Dive and Been a Sun and Sliver, and people were attuned to the songs that weren't recorded yet. But they say there's this Team Spirit song, and they started playing it, and seriously, a minute into it, people kind of started looking at each other, and right after the first chorus, and kind of mumbling what the you know, this is great. And I mean, you could literally look around and see people freaking out about this song. And my friend Susan, who I was with, ran outside, and later I found out she thought she was gonna throw up. She was so moved. And afterwards there was this second of silence, which is a long time for there to be silence after a song ends. And I was standing next to Kurt Bloch, who's in the Fastbacks, and I just kind of look up at him, and he looks down, what was that? It's I don't know, that's the best song I ever heard. And people were really talking about it. What was that song they played? And when was the last time you went to a show and afterwards people singled out a song that no one had ever heard before? That's exactly when I knew that they were destined for the big time.
Nevermind comes out 8 months after the Gulf War, which had 90% approval ratings, theoretically. The people who bought Nevermind are not the people who were measured by opinion polls. And I think that a whole generation realized how far outside of the mainstream we really were. That record became a kind of rallying point for a little while. It broke through the anonymity of despair that one feels in an isolated place when one holds views that are not widely held.
And it is a shame that that song is like Stairway to Heaven or whatever now, because it really genuinely is an amazing song.
We got a lot of attention, you know what I mean? A lot of, like, Teen Spirit was kind of played into the ground, kind of made me feel a little self-conscious, you know. What do you guys think of Hysteria?
Oh, it's a load of shit. I think there are at least 10 to 15 other bands who are just as good, if not better than us, and they deserve just as much attention as we do if they choose to take that attention, if they want it.
When Nirvana hit the radio, it was like, I don't know, it was like that sound that you could listen to, the sound that you could dance to, and that you could take with you anywhere, and basically that my parents could tolerate. Thought it was a great sound.
Well, I guess Nirvana just means unequivocal music to me, just intense vibrations of the soul. Just, there's been nothing like that pre-Nirvana to me, except for possibly Sonic Youth. Just Nirvana is beautiful music.
Nevermind, it's such a crazy good record. I mean, I remember when it was done and people had advanced tapes and whatnot, and it was shocking how good that record was.
Sold out everything. We've had really good stock on them. They sell a lot for us, and we cleaned out really quick. I mean, we're down to the last little singles, so we got rid of the albums about noon.
So you're all out of stock of Nirvana albums as of right now?
A bunch on order. We'll have them back in tomorrow.
It's probably the biggest selling record in my store.
It introduced America to its musical underground. For better or worse, I'm not sure, you know. Because now I think it used to be that you had to discover these things for yourself, that the youth had to search these things out, and it was something really special. Now a lot of it's organized for the kids.
Here you have this band that they were ahead of their time. They were making, you know, poetry, and they were doing things that nobody understood, but everybody loved. And then they faded out with the death of their lead singer and lyrics writer. And
I think people tend to overanalyze the whole situation. It was just a good band. They sounded good. They were different.
They went from being the best underground band in the world to being the most important band in the world in about 6 weeks. These guys didn't have the beginnings of a clue as to how they were supposed to protect themselves. It had just never even occurred to them that this could happen to them. And until you've been out on the road and been down that road, you don't realize what a grind it is. I mean, it's one of the great fallacies of rock and roll that being a rock star is a good thing. It's not good for the music if you listen to the records people make after they've become successful. And it's not good for the human beings by and large, because you're living a completely unnatural life. You're on the road. You're surrounded by people who won't tell you the truth because it's not in their best interest to tell you this truth. You have 23 hours a day of travel and boredom and an hour a day on stage when you get to get your yayas out. It isn't a whole lot of fun.
One of the most intense experiences I had photographing Nirvana live was at the Reading Festival in the UK in 1992. Just prior, like 5 days prior, Courtney and Kurt had Francis, and there were a lot of rumors that Nirvana weren't going to play because Kurt's health was so bad, and just all these rumors flying. Well, they came on, and actually Kurt got wheeled on in a wheelchair with a gray wig by the Melody Maker journalist Everett True. And actually, I think this is one of the only photos that captured that. I was the only photographer that was allowed on stage that day. And it was really intense to have Nirvana playing in front of you and 45,000 fans all steaming from a whole day of rain and mud, singing along to every Nirvana song. It really sent chills up my spine. And this is kind of a symbolic photo of Kurt reflected in his silhouette.
Kurt didn't, later, I think it's very well documented how he felt about success, but Chris and Dave just were great, yeah.
What do you want to know?
Okay.
Eddie speaks.
Obvious question right off. What's it like to win one of these things?
Oh, I've already got 2 of them. I have 3 toilets, and I put 2 of them in each toilet so far, and now I've won a 3rd, so I've
That's the
got
American
all
dream.
match.
2 3-car garage, too.
Yep.
That's right.
Hey, can I have that cookie too?
You know, it seems that people come to these things not so much to win the awards and take them home and, put them there, but for the party, for the whole thing, and to see the live performances. Is that kind of it?
No, because if we don't come, they won't show our videos on MTV, and our careers will be over.
Yeah, you have to schmooze or they'll.
Yeah.
You have to kiss butt.
We're here to glad hand.
It's not choose or lose, it's schmooze or lose.
Schmooze or lose.
Is that true? How important is MTV in determining what not only America, but what the rest of the world gets to even hear?
What do you think?
And that's
It's a monopoly. It's a 99% monopoly.
And that's a disturbing paradox between the access MTV has to the people of the world and the potential that it's just pissing away.
It's become a catalog for, middle America viewers. They decide that the hot new video is the hot new band and whatever.
So people would say that you guys did really well with MTV and MTV exposure.
We did well financially and success-wise, but that doesn't mean that doesn't have anything to do with our music or what we want to say. It's just that we wanted to participate in the music industry, so we participated with MTV. We sold out.
Yep.
Kill us.
Pressure is on you that you better show up and you better, you won't press and all that stuff.
Well, they said that they know where my little sister goes to school, and that
There's
and
already
they said
been a couple
they told me
car
my mom's
bombings.
address, where she lives, and that's scary when they start threatening your family.
When you go on to another album, like one's just coming out, is there any more pressure to play the game, or is the pressure off to keep buying into the whole system? Corporation?
As of right now, officially, it's over with. You've got the first scoop. I quit.
The new record, the new album is a concept album based on a fictitious, speculative romance between Edward Shevardnadze and Boris Yeltsin.
Did you do a video for it?
Yeah, I'm gonna be Mikhail Gorbachev. Kurt is gonna be Leonid Brezhnev. We're gonna glue toothbrushes to his eyebrows and dye him black. And Dave is gonna be Raisa Gorbachev. And we're gonna express our sexual frustrations.
Okay, one more. Go, chug.
Look, alfalfa impersonation.
All right, thanks.
Hey, thanks a lot.
All right.
I used to hate it when bands would be on soapboxes or whatever, talk about stuff because it was just pretentious. But with Nirvana, I could see, and especially reading some of their fan mail, I mean, these kids would say, I used to beat up gay people and then you told me not to and now I don't. I mean, it was that direct. It's like, they could. I mean, then I completely turned around. I was like, Kurt, you gotta go on a speaking tour of the world and tell these people what to do. That's so great. And, I really came to realize what kind of political power they had.
Kurt was very interested in feminism. He considered himself a feminist. He cared about women's expression, and he cared deeply about how men and women can hurt each other and how sexism hurts both men and women.
I photographed Kurt for The Advocate, the national gay and lesbian monthly. And I just went to his hotel room. He was staying in a hotel here, he and Courtney and Francis, because no one would rent him a house at the time. Damage deposit was too big, I guess. So he was staying in a hotel, and we just got to talking. And I asked him, well, can I photograph you while you're talking? And he said, sure, and I got these really, really intimate, almost like tender photographs.
One of the best things that Kurt ever said was that, and he said in the liner notes to Incesticide maybe, or one of those, he's like, if you're a racist, sexist, a homophobe, or in any way an asshole, don't buy my record. I don't care that you like me, because I hate you. I don't want your money.
He really hit home on a lot of subjects and then his suicide totally tore me apart. It was like losing a father figure because he was there to listen to my problems. Even if he wasn't there in person, I'd just pop a tape in and play it and feel totally at peace.
The song Rape Me in particular, people think it's like specifically about rape, but I mean my interpretation is about how he felt as though, he was raped, by society, about society's rape, on human beings in general,
I think that Kurt was not afraid of difficult subject matter, not afraid of the unpleasant and dark side of experience and of his own self.
Kids just listen to what they're supposed to. And I think that's kind of what was funniest about Nirvana, is that later these kids would realize, hold on a minute. These guys are telling me the gay people are cool, And they're talking about this band that's supposed to be the best band ever that I've never even heard of. And so later they're like starting to discover these things that Nirvana is directly or indirectly turning them on to, when all they meant to do was buy the album by the popular band.
A lot of what In Utero is about is the struggle to be a man, but not be an oppressive man. There are many, many lyrics on In Utero that are about the body. Songs like Penny Royalty and Milk It and Scentless Apprentice all mention reproduction, the muck of the flesh.
There's all sorts of rumors going on about how your next album will sound. Some people say it's going to be really wild, raw and confusing. Some say it's going to be really quiet and acoustic and pretty.
Both. Mixture of both. It won't be as clean as the last album, that's for sure.
That's a good album cover, or a name. Our next record, Raw Wild. If our record's that name, you're going to go, shit. You're going to go, those guys, man. Raw, wild, and confusing. We're going to be on the cover going, no, one of us is going to look raw, is going to be naked. One of us is going to look wild with loincloth and like some wild man. One of us is going to look really confused, Raw, wild, and confusing.
I have a feeling with the next record, we're going to lose a lot of our audience.
In Utero was a real sign of growth. It was a kind of a growing pains album. You can even hear it in the lyrics. I think Kurt has a line on the album where he says, "My bones grew and it hurt." He was going through a transformation in his personal life as well as in his artistic life. He'd had a child, he was in a marriage, he was working with Courtney as a creative partner.
One day in May, Kurt called me, and he wanted me to come over and photograph this collage that he had made on his living room floor, and I guess it was going to be for the back cover of In Utero. So he said, "Got to be here in an hour though, because the flowers are going to wilt." I'm like, "Oh my God, what am I getting into?" So I go over, and on the floor, he had laid out all these baby fetuses and flowers, and it was very beautiful. It was very, very stunning. So I set up and photographed it, and at one point, Francis wandered in, and we took some pictures. That's Francis and Courtney in front of the collage.
Revere a person because of his music, because that's what he was. He was a musician. He was a pretty good one. I saw him in concert. I bought their albums. Good stuff, but I don't know. Revere a person for their music, not because they died.
The thing about Kurt is that
I believed everything he said. I believed the pain, and he's still part of my everyday life. I think about him every day.
Cobain was like one of the voices of our generation who just, you know, kind of saw it as it was. You know, the same way that that Lennon or Jagger or Richards or McCartney kind of saw it in their time. These guys kind of came out and called bullshit. And Cobain was kind of on the darker sides.
There was a lot of people out there that just listened to Nirvana because it sounded cool, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then there's a lot of other people out there that actually listen to the music a little deeper than that. And in our generation, there's a lot of problems out there, and a lot of people don't know how to deal with it. But he didn't offer answers. He let us know that there was somebody else out there that had the same problems that we did, that felt the same way about it. And so, a lot of the times that's better than giving us answers.
I think in the long run, what was surprising to the mainstream was how many people identified with Cobain's howl, which is as evocative of this generation as Ginsberg's howl is of the Beat.
Whatever personal problems he may have had in his life, they all came out through his music, his art, and he would explode on stage. And if you look at the photographs of him playing, he always, like here he's smiling, but he's always aware of what he's doing. Even though he's writing on these people's hands, he's finding that chord, you know, and he's always was very determined. He always had a very determined look on his face.
Punk rock should mean freedom, liking and accepting anything that you like, playing whatever you want, as sloppy as you want, as long as it's good and it has passion.
This was the last group shot I did of Nirvana, and this was a session done for Alternative Press around the release of In Utero, and done down the hall here. It's kind of symbolic, the black hole there above his head. You start to see little bits of symbolism in the photographs like that. And this was actually one of the last live photos I took of Kurt, where he was, after he'd done a stage dive during a Mudhoney set, he landed back on stage and he draped a guitar around his neck and proceeded to play Fang and Black Flag covers.
Kurt's loss is such a great loss because he, more than anyone in alternative rock, was challenging the roles of men and women, challenging sex roles, and trying to point to a vision for a new kind of equality.
The day Kurt died, I was here building this gallery, and my then girlfriend and I had reservations out on the coast for a couple of days with our dog. And the first thing that happened was that I didn't believe anything I heard on the radio. The second thing that happened was the phone rang off the hook with a bunch of magazines trying to hire me to write about his death. And I was grateful that I was able to say to them, "I'm sorry, I'm out of town this weekend." As I drove through and toward Aberdeen, I flipped through the radio stations to find the local radio station. And I had it for a good 45 minutes before I lost it again. And during that time, they said absolutely nothing about Kurt Cobain, and they played none of Nirvana's music. You drove through town, as you have no choice to do if you're going to the coast, and there wasn't a single sign. There were no indications that he'd ever lived there or that he had just died. Life went on as if he'd never been. We came back through on Sunday, and I'd kind of thought, well, there'd be some placards outside the churches because it's a church-going kind of a town on Sunday, and it would be an awfully Christian thing to say a few prayers for the man, and there wasn't a sign.
The moment that sticks in my mind is actually running into him on the street about 2 weeks before he killed himself. And it was just, you know, I guess in relation to events, I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I saw him, and we talked, and we exchanged phone numbers, and he was really happy about the fact that the book of photographs that I'm doing, he was like, all right, at last, you know, get the real thing. And we chatted, and he was concerned about my wife's illness, and just really, you know, that sticks in my mind.
Not when people recognize you, not when you can't have a moment of, the people are waiting in the lobby of your hotel and constantly asking you for your signature, which still baffles me. I don't understand the autograph concept at all.
It can be a burden, you know, to be wanting to be famous, kind of vain, really, if you think about it. Everybody, look at me, you know. It's like, it'll pass someday, you know.
Most people who are really famous end up staying in their hotel rooms all the time. Total reclusives, and they don't do anything. That sucks.
They were very true people, I think, especially like Kurt. I see clips of him when he was on Head Baker's Ball and just came out in that yellow gown and said, all right, man, that's excellent, I love it. Just were themselves and played what they felt, and that's what rock and roll is all about. It's really good stuff, and it's what I listen to. I like it a lot. Now we're here to see Foo Fighters and Sweet 75, who are like the little bastard sons, but more power to them.
I'm a negative creep. I'm a negative creep. I'm a negative creep when I'm stoned. Those are words to live by. Kurt and Nirvana rock.
We'd see him once in a while. We'd see him walk by here. I never knew that at the time that, you know, he spent as much time under the bridge as he did. The Kurt Shrine, I guess you would call the bridge down there.
Yeah.
I found that out later, that the kids, oh yeah, Kurt stayed down there all the time. Him and his friends, they'd go down there and smoke their cigarettes or whatever else they wanted to do.
I think a sense of alienation is kind of a crucial part of most good songwriting.
I think Kurt changed rock. I think Nirvana has changed rock. And no matter what sad turn the tale took in the end, I think that's what we can be grateful to.
Everyone thinks it's an easy ride to fame. Everyone thinks they know you even though they only know your name. And when you're up, there's no wrong you can do. But it's when you're down that you need 'em, and there's no one there for you. You had it all the day you signed your name. They say the winner who takes all is bound to have to fall. I'm so sorry, Mr. Cobain.
Nirvana were the band that told America how unhappy its children were.
Bottled up like a cork inside. Time bomb, baby, time to say bye-bye. Pressure almost everywhere. Pressure on the street. Pressure in the air. And though I seem to just get by, never fail to justify